Everybody, I'd like to call this
Oh
meeting
wow,
to
this is
order.
really quiet.
This is the 12th meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security of the House of Commons, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the House Order of Reference of October 3rd last. The committee is meeting for its study of Bill C-8, an act respecting cybersecurity, amending the Telecommunications Act, and making consequential amendments to other acts. I'd like to welcome our witnesses for the first hour. Beginning with the Honourable Gary Anandasangri, Member of Parliament, Minister of Public Safety. From the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, we have Mr. Richard Bilodeau, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, National Cyber and Security Branch, as well as Colin McSween, Director General, National Cybersecurity Directorate, and Kellyanne Gibson, Director, the Cyber Protection Policy Division. From the Department of Industry, Andre Arbour, Director General, Telecommunications and Internet Policy Branch, and Mr. Wen Kwan, Director General, Spectrum and Telecommunications Sector. Welcome to you all. Minister, you have 5 minutes for your preliminary remarks. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on Bill C-8, an act respecting cybersecurity.
The heck?
State-sponsored and others are increasing in number and in sophistication. Canada must be better prepared to deal with these threats, to protect Canadians, our critical infrastructure, and our economy. C-8 will enhance cybersecurity in 4 major sectors: finance, telecommunications, energy, and transportation. Part 1 of the bill amends the Telecommunications Act to enshrine the security of Canada's telecommunication systems as a policy objective, bringing the security framework regulating the sector in line with those of other critical infrastructure sectors. That will allow government to act swiftly in an industry where seconds can decide the safety, confidentiality, and ability of essential services. The bill also introduces the new Critical Cyber Systems Protection Act, or CCSPA, which would legally require designated operators to protect their critical cyber systems. Cette partie de projet de loi fournit au gouvernement.
This part of the bill provides the tools the government needs to take further action in order to address a range of vulnerabilities.
It's comprised of the Canadian telecommunication services, banking systems, energy, and transportation. However, the Governor and Council may also add to that list those designated as operators of vital services and systems would be obliged to develop and implement cyber security programs, mitigate supply chain and third-party risk, as well as comply with cyber security directions. The CCSPA will also increase information sharing on cyber threats by requiring the reporting of cybersecurity incidents above a certain threshold. Right now, there is no such legal requirements for industry to share this kind of information, which means there could be threats that the government is not aware of. There is also a legal mechanism for the government to compel action in the face of known threats or vulnerabilities. When it comes to national security, we cannot rely on the goodwill of industry alone. We must enshrine a more robust cybersecurity framework into law. Since the introduction of this legislation under former Bill C-26, which was passed unanimously in the House last year, there were widespread consultations with stakeholders. We listened to the concerns that were raised. Parmi celles-ci figure le besoin d'une...
Among these, there was a need for more transparency, as well as the need to ensure privacy is protected.
Is already protected through a number of constitutional and legislative instruments. But C-8 will provide greater certainty to Canadians that their privacy and personal information will be protected. When confidential information must be shared, it must be treated as confidential. Recipients of such information must similarly be respectful of that confidentiality. The bill also assures Canadians that orders or directions issued under both Part 1 and Part 2 of the legislation will not be used to engage in surveillance or to intercept private communication. This responds directly to the concerns we heard from civil liberty groups. Bill C-8 also includes new provisions to increase the government's transparency and accountability. For example, stakeholders said there was a potential for orders or directions to be issued without the government consulting or considering relevant factors, such as whether reasonable alternatives exist to issuing order or direction. As a result of these concerns, the bill includes a reasonableness standard and a non-exhaustive list of factors that the Governor and Council must first consider before issuing an order or direction. Le projet de loi C-8 assure
Bill C-8 provides transparency and accountability to Canadians. The bill also provides further reassurances to Canadians that their privacy and their personal information will be protected.
That my honourable colleagues will agree that Bill C-8 would provide a strong foundation for securing Canada's critical infrastructure against fast-evolving cyber threats. And I look forward to your questions and comments, as well as I want to take this moment to thank the colleagues that are here at the table with me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Nous passons
Thank you,
maintenant-
Minister. And now we'll move on to the question period. We'll begin with Member Caputo for 6 minutes.
To my questions, so I appreciate that. I'd like to also thank the officials here. Minister, you are here on bills C-8 and C-12, so I will be asking you about both bills today. Minister...
Excuse me, Mr. Caputo, if I may clarify, my understanding was the first hour was on C-8 and the second hour was on C-12, but I'm more than glad to, because I don't have the officials here for C-12 until the second hour.
We can ask them questions when we need to. I would just like to explore your expertise, your understanding, and your knowledge on both bills organically, if we will. So
that is fine, Mr. Caputo. You have the right to do so. This being said, officials not being here, you may not get the answers that you would be entitled to.
I'm if we could pause the time, please. There was a point of order that was just mentioned. At the end of the day, I'm not looking for answers that officials may give. If I have questions for officials, then I'll ask the officials the questions. Right now, this is my time to ask the minister about what the minister knows about bills C-8 and C-12. We actually asked for 2 separate meetings on C-8 and C-12. We didn't get them, even though the parliamentary secretary committed to them. So I will be asking the minister questions on both bills. So why don't we actually start with one thing that's certainly germane to C-8. When was the Foreign Interference Commissioner supposed to be appointed, Minister?
I've indicated this a number of times. They will be appointed in short order. We are finalizing, and we will bring forward a name to colleagues opposite for feedback.
That's not what I asked you, Minister. Again, please answer the questions I ask. When was the Foreign Interference Commissioner supposed to be appointed?
But as I indicated to you, and I've spoken to you a number of times on this, we have been working towards appointing a Foreign Interference Commissioner. I wish this was done much earlier. As you're aware, we're going through a process.
Minister, I asked you a 5-second question, and I should get a 5-second answer because it was supposed to be a date. Okay, this could not be a more clear question, Minister. When was the Foreign Interference Commissioner supposed to be appointed? Just the date, please.
But I'm here to speak about Bill C-8 and Bill C-12. So I would respectfully ask that you keep to those parameters. If you wish me to come on another matter, I have made myself available.
Apparently, when we do that, we can't actually get it, even if the parliamentary secretary agrees to it. So you say you're not here to talk about foreign interference. Are you saying that Bill C-8, critical infrastructure, protecting our critical infrastructure from foreign adversaries, are you saying that our foreign interference and our foreign registry is not germane to that bill? Am I hearing that right? Let the minister can respond. He can
I hear a
respond.
point of order.
Oui, s'il vous plaît, on est ici pour...
We're here to investigate two very important pieces of legislation, C8 and C12. Right now, you are talking about a different subject completely. It is our good fortune to have the minister and his team here with us. I would like us to be able to focus on the bills that are important and have them move forward to see what it is that we need to say or verify regarding these bills. And right now, we're wasting time on things that are off topic. Chair, I would like us to come back to the subject of this meeting.
He is on the subject of this meeting.
To make sure that there was no
If I
time
can
wasted.
on the same point of order, no standing.
I'm sorry,
order.
I'll just finish, please. So I think we all heard the comment. This is a suggestive comment. It's not a real point of order. So I'll turn back to you, Mr. Caputo.
Thank you. We actually, to the Liberals' point, we actually could have been past this if the minister would just tell us the date. Foreign interference is certainly germane to protecting our foreign infrastructure. If we can't agree on this, we can't agree on what day of the week it is, Minister. What date was this supposed to be done? What date was there supposed to have a commissioner appointed? Just the date.
Mr. Caputo, I'd indicated that we are working towards the appointment of an interference commissioner.
Mr. Caputo, I'm sorry.
Mr. Caputo, I've answered the question.
I'll have to interrupt both of
If
you.
you don't like the answer,
Minister
then
and
I will...
Minister, MP. So there are two issues here. First, the topic, which is obviously open to discussion. Second, the overlapping of comments and questions. If we want people to understand the flow of the conversation, including in the other official language, we cannot speak both at the same time. That is making the work of the interpreters impossible. So I would invite everyone to have a fluid, intense conversation if they wish to, but it cannot overlap. Otherwise, I'll have to stop everyone.
He can reclaim his time, do
Well,
close.
foreign interference was pretty darn serious. We had 11 parliamentarians that were suspected, and I asked you for a date, Minister, and you won't even give that to me, to Canadians, on something that's pretty darn serious. If you say you're answering a question to me, and I didn't even ask that question, when all we want to know is this: Canadians expect seriousness on foreign interference, and you as the minister are the one in charge. You're the one appearing here, and you won't even give us a date. And for that, you should be reflective on whether or not you're doing your job, with all due respect, Minister. Let's move on.
Yes, a point of order, please.
Mr. Caputo is talking about C70. The agenda was shared with all members. First hour, we are stick with C8, and second hour, C12. So I have difficulty to understand why we are discussing now C70 instead of C8.
That is, again, an appropriate comment, but it's not a point of order. It's suggestive to others of how they want to use their time. And I'll turn back to you, Mr. Caputo.
Well, we can always rely on the Liberals to try to deflect for a minister that won't give us a date. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, I haven't interrupted my Liberal colleagues, Mr. Chair, and I would appreciate if they would give me the same courtesy, because we're hearing more from them than we are from the minister. Last time at committee, Minister, when we were been talking a lot about foreign nationals, you said that there were we talked about 30,000 removal orders, and you said, quote, Mr. Caputo, there are 30,000 people who are going through the system and they are going to be removed. They are in queue. We know their addresses, end quote. Now, it turns out, Minister, that there are actually 62,000, or were 62,000 people, because your officials told us there were 62,000, and you said that...
Yes, please.
Another point of order.
I think we're going to be going over and over on the same subject here, Chair. I think it would be important to focus on bills C8 and C12 and take advantage of the minister's time here. Our colleagues have been asking to have the minister here on C8 and C12 for a long time, and here we are again spending time on other subjects. I would like us to stick to C8 for the first hour and C12 for the second.
Again,
there are two things
it's his
here.
time.
The first is that, in fact, the first hour is on C8. The second is that the chair cannot control the questions and answers asked and given. The members are to use their best judgment to know how to be as relevant as possible. Mr. Caputo.
Point of order so the time doesn't start, please. C12 is directly related to our strong border. The minister was here last time, and we are holding him to account for things he said. I don't know how that's irrelevant, and I've been interrupted 3 times in 4 minutes by the Liberals. I get it. They don't want the minister to speak. They don't want the minister to speak about relevant things. That's not my problem. That is the Liberals' problem. I will carry on. And I'd ask that I could have that question because I have to start it from the top again. Minister, I asked you 62,000 people. You knew about 30,000. So you didn't know about where half of the people were. And you said, we know their addresses. Do you know the addresses of the 32,000 people who are at large without warrant? Just a yes or no, please.
Mr. Caputo, the numbers you're referencing are available on the CBSA website under removals, and I will direct you to there. There are right now removals in progress. There are 30,733. There are individuals that we do have contact with in some form or another. There are currently 32,000 who are in the area wanted who we are seeking to remove.
Again, please answer my question. Do you have addresses for the 32,000 you were seeking to remove as you told us last time? Yes or no?
We do have addresses, Mr. Caputo.
You have addresses for 32,000 people for whom there are warrants? Okay, Minister, the natural question is if you have addresses for them, why aren't they being arrested right now?
Mr. Caputo, for questions like this, you do need to give me some time to answer these questions, right? So if I could elaborate, yes, we do have addressed this. They may not be accurate. The veracity of that is up to the CBSA, and they're working to expedite the removals. As I've indicated in the past, we're on target to remove over 20,000 people this year.
32,000, so that should give Canadians great confidence that 12,000 people will be left. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, turning to MP Akan for 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and my questions will be based on C8 as per the agenda. So, Minister,
no one cares.
Some members of the opposition have suggested that Bill C8 could allow the government to suspend an individual's internet access, which has understandably caused confusion and concerns among Canadians. Could you clarify for the committee that what powers the bill provides and whether any provisions in Bill C8 permits the government to restrict or cut off ordinary Canadians' internet service?
To be very clear, C8 does not enable the government to cut off individual internet service. There are very narrow areas where an individual user may have an unacceptable level of risk, who has a past record, and whose continued access to the internet could have repercussions for the safety and security of our critical infrastructure. In those very limited circumstances, there could be an order for an individual's internet to be halted, and that is in the narrowest of scope.
Okay,
it does
so
not
you just said no, but then yes.
To everyone, it applies to those who have a perpetual
just
record
contradicted
of
yourself.
Threats to critical infrastructure.
Oh, God.
So, to be absolutely clear, Minister, Bill C8 imposes network-level security obligations on telecommunications operators, not individual users. It doesn't authorize the government to monitor personal communications or disconnect someone's internet connection. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we have a couple of experts here. Maybe I can turn to them for a more elaborate response.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The authorities under Part 1 allowed to take action to protect the Canadian telecommunications system, and any action that is taken needs to be reasonable in relation to the gravity of the threat. So in the instance of, for instance, to disconnect a particular system, that would only be in the circumstance where our telecommunications system is under severe threat, and any action needs to be reasonable in relation to that threat.
Thank you Very much, Mr. Arbour. So, Minister, this bill is fundamentally about strengthening the infrastructure of Canadians that rely on our telecommunications network. So, Bill C-26, the predecessor of this legislation, passed the House last year unanimously because of protecting Canada's telecommunications systems is a shared national priority. So could you please explain what vulnerabilities or gaps in our current framework that Bill C-8 is designed to address and how it enhances the security and resilience of those networks?
And certainly, look, telecommunication is one of 4 sectors that are the subject of this particular bill. As you're aware, we have transportation as well as other critical infrastructures that are subject of the bill. Essentially, what it attempts to do is ensure that there's disclosure and there's transparency when a critical infrastructure is under attack or is attacked. There is a duty to disclose the nature and the scope of the attack to one of our agencies. It also imposes a requirement for each critical infrastructure unit to have their own plan to address the issues around cybersecurity. As you may know, Ms. Akan, many cybersecurity incidents go without reporting for issues around reputation, issues around risk to the brand name. So this really does impose a legal requirement for disclosure of specific incidents that will help other critical infrastructures from taking precautions and proactive action.
Thank you, Minister. One of the strengths of Bill C-8 is that it requires operators to build cybersecurity programs before an incident happens. So under Clause 9 of the Critical Cyber Systems Protection Act, organizations must proactively identify and manage risks. Could you please speak to how this forward-looking approach will help Canadians to prevent attacks instead of reacting them after?
Look, increasingly, cyber attacks have both an economic impact, but also issues around confidence of our critical infrastructure, as well as issues around privacy that involves data sets of so many different, both individual as well as business clients. And there is a need for every institution that has a critical infrastructure that they manage to proactively develop a system that will enable them to react and to have a process by which disclosure takes place, but also to take preventative actions to prevent and as well as to ensure that events, critical cyber attacks do not occur, and when they do occur, are responsibly dealt with.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Merci, Madame la députée Akan, ce qui nous permet.
Thank you, Member Akan. And now over to Minister Fortin. Member Fortin, you have 6 minutes. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here with us today. Minister, your bill raises various questions and concerns among Canadians. I'm not judging as to its necessity. We'll see that during when it comes to a vote. But there is a certain level of concern. I have found that the Privacy Commissioner testified before the committee here last week and raised some concerns as to the transmission of information under 15.4. I think it was under Section 2 of the bill, which amends 15.4 of the Act, which says that the minister can require of any person that they provide, based on certain modalities, to the person designated or to himself or herself information regarding which there are reasonable grounds to believe that they're relevant, etc., etc. But the reasonable grounds are not described. It's just a general statement, whereas in the amendments for 15.23 of the Act, it says that the scope and content of the provisions under Sections 1 and 2, it says in the French version that they're reasonable. I think that's a poor translation. It should have been must be reasonable, because in English it says must. And so it should have been translated that way into French. In French it only says are reasonable. But assuming the correction is made, the provisions must be reasonable in terms of the seriousness of the threat. This protection does not exist under 15.4. I would like to know why and whether or not you're planning to make any amendments to adopt this.
With you in many committees where you have done an incredible amount of work to ensure the consistency in both official languages. So if there are errors or omissions, we'll be more than glad to look at. With respect to the reasonableness standard, it is one which has been defined by the Supreme Court, and there's a fair bit of clarity in terms of what that is. And for the purpose, I think, of the Act, it is a standard that was defined by the Supreme Court that clarifies the law on standard of review, provided guidance on the application of the reasonable standard. The primary case is Canada versus Vavilov, 2019, and it's essentially outlines the test, and I don't want to go into the finer details of it, but that's the reference that I would provide to you, Mr.
Merci.
Yeah.
Monsieur le ministre,
Thank you.
À votre avis,
Minister,
les recommandations...
in your opinion, the Privacy Commissioner's recommendations should be carefully listened to and respected, or should we disregard them because they're not important?
I had the opportunity to meet with the Privacy Commissioner last week myself. I believe a number of the recommendations that they've put forward, there's 5 of them in total. I believe there's 2 or 3 of them that have been incorporated within the number of amendments that were adopted earlier.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Mais ici,
Thank you, Minister. But here, we're talking about qualifying or outlining the definition of reasonableness. If it was useful under 15.2, shouldn't the same reasoning apply? I'm not the minister, you are, but in my humble opinion, it would seem that the same reasoning should apply to 15.4. Reasonable grounds, you know as well as I do, that the courts will interpret reasonableness in various ways, depending on which judge is, and for all kinds of good or not so good reasons. This is a variable criterion. Whereas in 15.2, you seem to have clearly defined what reasonableness is, saying that it regards the seriousness of the threat. That seems understandable to me. We're talking about an exchange of information which would otherwise be confidential. Perhaps it is necessary, but what the Commissioner is telling us is that even if it's necessary, we have to be sure that this is not done in an undue fashion, because it has to represent a grave harm. It represents grave harm to freedom, individual freedom and liberties. Here we talk about reasonableness with respect to the seriousness of the threat. Again, I'm repeating my question, and apologies for doing so, but it's important to me. How come it's not in 15.4? Reasonable grounds to believe. I think that would be something easy to add regarding the seriousness of the threat, just as it's done under 15.2. Why not in 15.4? Now, maybe it's your intention to do so. I would invite you to do so if that's not the case. But if you're not doing it, why not? Why do you think that there's no use to doing it?
This is under advisement, but let me just comment that 15.2, the definition, I suspect is defined initially. 15.4 would follow the same definition, but I will be more than glad to look at it closely. If I do have follow-up, I will follow up with you directly.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le ministre. J'apprécie.
Thank you very much, Minister. I appreciate that. Thank you, Member Fortin. And now over to Member Lloyd. You have 5 minutes.
Chair, Minister, last week the Privacy Commissioner testified that this bill is lacking some key privacy safeguards, including inconsistent proportionality tests included in Section 15.2, subsection 3, but not elsewhere in the bill. And there is no requirement for his office to be notified when the communications security establishment when there's a cyber breach that threatens Canadians' private information. I find that these omissions from the bill concerning. So my first question is, will the officials provide in writing to this committee the reasons why the proportionality test is not included throughout the bill, but only in that one section? And then secondly, to the minister for today, do you believe that the Privacy Commissioner's concerns have merit, and should they be included in amendments to the bill?
Again, Mr. Lloyd, I did have a chance to speak to the Privacy Commissioner last week. I am aware of the concerns that he has identified. There are a number of safeguards in the bill that includes referral, reporting to both NCIRA and NCCOP, which report ultimately to Parliament, as you're aware. We've also taken a number of amendments that he has proposed in the previous iteration under Bill 26. There's, I believe, 2 or 3 of the proposed amendments were incorporated. For those that are outstanding, there is reference to the Privacy Act, compliance with the Privacy Act. So I believe we have taken a number of very important steps. I am, as I've always said, I'm open to discussions on potential changes.
We did have testimony at the same meeting from the Intelligence Commissioner, who receives reports from our intelligence community. We were told by officials that the information provided under C8 is going to be technical information, not private information. But the Intelligence Commissioner raised very concerning, saying that when he reviews these reports, the context that he's provided does include Canadians' personal information. So what is going to be done to ensure that when providing context to these technical reports, that Canadians' private information is not impacted or revealed?
Well, look, I think the role, I respect the role of the Intelligence Commissioner. Again, I also met with him last week, and I respect the work that he does. I mean, with respect, the issues of disclosure that are part of C8 is very much of a technical nature. It does not go into the privacy issues of individuals, and it should not impact necessarily the work of the Intelligence Commissioner. We've taken a number of safeguards, including reference to NCIRA and NCCOP, which are required to, there's an obligation for us to report any incidents to these agencies within 90 days of the incident.
Thank you, Minister. Sorry to cut you off. Is the government required to report cyber incidents that impact the government of Canada itself?
I'm just going to maybe, if I could ask Colin to answer that question, Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the answer is yes. The Government of Canada has a response plan known as the Federal Cyber Incident Response Plan. This is available online. As part of the requirement for that, should the federal government be subject to a cyber incident, it is to be reported into the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, the Treasury Board Secretariat, and Public Safety Canada.
Are those reports ever made public?
Of the specific incidents?
Yes.
Not to my knowledge.
Now, are you aware of incidents where Canadian government servers have been hacked for illicit crypto mining operations, costing the Canadian taxpayer millions of dollars?
Off the top of my head, no.
Minister, are you aware? I'm not. If there was an incident that there was illicit crypto mining on Canadian government servers that cost millions of dollars, would that not have to be reported in the public accounts as a loss?
I would assume it would be, Ms. Lloyd, yes.
And if it wasn't reported under the loss, why would be the reason why it wouldn't be reported?
I can't speculate, but if there's a specific incident, I will be more than glad to look at it and report back to this committee.
I'm just very concerned because part of this bill, there's secrecy provisions, and I'm concerned that there could be a lack of transparency because we know we're trying to hold, telecoms and others accountable when there's these cyber incidents, but who's holding the government accountable when they have cyber incidents that cost Canadian taxpayers millions and millions of dollars? And if the government doesn't report those incidents, we're potentially looking at Canadians not knowing the vulnerabilities in our government system. What do you say to that, Minister?
On a practical level, my understanding is that reporting does happen on a case-by-case basis when incidents of cybersecurity that impact the privacy concerns of individuals. I do believe there's reporting that does occur.
Merci, député Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Ms. Dandurand, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Duclos.
us. And I'll start right away with just asking you to comment on some of the things that we heard during the second reading of the bill. So there's a member, a Conservative member, which happens to be with us, MP Struss, who said that Bill C-8 would allow the Liberals to kick people off the internet without a warrant. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so what can what is this bill going to do?
And I think it's very important, and I humbly ask all colleagues on this. It's important that when we're bringing forward a legislation such as this, it should not be a politicized type of piece of legislation. This is meant for the safety and security of all Canadians. Canadians need to have confidence in our security apparatus. They need to have confidence that all of us are working together for the best interest of Canadians. So in that vein, I would say a simplistic assertion such as that really is inaccurate. What is accurate is in very limited circumstances when an individual who may have access to internet through a service provider poses a risk to the safety and security of our critical infrastructure, who has demonstrated that type of behavior, continued behavior, could harm our critical infrastructure and thereby many other systems. There is, on very limited scope, the ability to terminate their internet services.
So you said no, and then now you're saying yes.
It is on exceptional circumstances. It's not on a routine basis.
Okay, so yes.
Thank you, Minister. Yes. It is very clear. And I'd also like to bring back Bill C-26. Are there major differences between Bill C-26 that all parties voted in favor and the current bill?
No, there isn't. As you know, Bill 26, C-26 went to both through both houses, and there was a technical issue that had to be corrected.
Is this a point of order, Mr. Chair? How is this relevant, I wonder?
Exactly. I was just thinking the same thing.
Well, we're talking about Bill C-8. Is that not? Is that any different than the point of order that was made by the Liberals? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So la même remarque s'applique que celle que j'ai faite tout à l'heure.
The same comment that I made earlier applies. Members have the right and the ability to ask questions which they feel to be the most relevant for the topic of debate of the day, which today is C-8, and other directly or indirectly related questions. Madam, your time has been stopped. Yes, Mr. Lloyd.
I just was made aware that during my speaking time with the minister that the microphones were not being synced properly, and so my questions were not being picked up. And I'm just wondering if the clerk can take a look at that, because it's just concerning if people can't hear what I had to say at committee. That impacts the testimony of this committee. Thank you.
Good. That is an appropriate point of order, and technicians will look into this, and we'll come back to that in a moment when we have clear answers. Madame la députée.
Thank you, Chair. And we are talking about Bill C-8, and I'm going to ask you to comment on Bill C-8 and similarities or differences with Bill C-26 that was presented during the last session. So are there major differences between Bill C-26 and C-8? And reminding that Bill C-26 was past all the steps in both chambers.
To maybe just comment on this, essentially it's the same bill with some very minor changes.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, so to answer your question, there was a administrative error that was corrected. The other substantive difference is because of Bill C-70 that adopted a secure administrative review procedure to allow, in the context of judicial reviews, a special process to consider confidential information, appoint special counsels to assess the intelligence that might be used in an administrative proceeding. And so SARP, as we reference it, replaced the provisions in C-26 that referenced a specific process. And so now SARP applies to almost all judicial reviews as opposed to piecemeal per legislation. So that was the real substantive change.
Thank you. So, Minister, there are no substantial differences between Bill C-26 and C-8, and Bill C-26 passed with the agreement of all the other parties. Thank you very much. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer?
Could you explain to us how the government is going to ensure that the powers conferred by C8 will not be extended beyond what is already provided for, in other words, beyond private companies? How will this be done?
It's quite clear that the scope of C8 involves, first and foremost, 4 areas of responsibility that are primarily in the federal domain. Any additional elements that need to be added on will require Governor and Council change that would expand the scope of the bill. Again, due to the nature of our federal state, anything outside of the federal domain will likely be unconstitutional. So it is a very narrow in scope in terms of the areas that can have application of this particular bill. There are a number of safeguards in place, including reporting requirements to NCIRA and NCCOP. There is a requirement for adherence to the Privacy Act, and there's also recourse to the federal court in some circumstances. So I believe a number of different safeguards have been put in place to ensure that there's no arbitrary application of this bill.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. C'est tout le temps que nous avons pour...
Thank you. This is all the time that we have for this section. Mr. Fortin, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Minister, I've looked at C8, and I don't see any independent mechanism to review orders issued by Cabinet. Don't you think something could have been added there about that for a control mechanism in terms of making there be accountability?
Is, in my opinion, subject to judicial review. So it is not. It doesn't end at just an order in council. That it can go beyond that. The decision can be reviewed by the courts.
Oui, je comprends que ça peut être révisé par la Cour, mais...
Yes, I understand that it can be reviewed by the courts. And perhaps I didn't express myself clearly, but generally speaking, wouldn't it be a good idea to have some sort of accountability process on the part of your department with respect to an independent organization? I don't know which one, but waiting for a citizen to ask for a judicial review may be a bit... well, I wouldn't say negligent, but I think that we could be more proactive than that and ensure annual accountability or some sort of every 5-year, every 2-year report. It would seem that there should be something in the Act to ensure that follow-up is done. Doesn't this seem to be useful to you?
The reason we have NCIRA and NCCOP, and they're now fairly established entities that do review, particularly around issues around national security, because in certain cases there is an element of discretion that's required, and they do report. So my response, Mr. Fortin, is that is built-in mechanism within the Act that does refer to NCCOP and NCIRA for review.
Qui répond à qui?
And to whom do they answer?
I mean, NCIRA ultimately reports to Parliament. They are institutions
À quelle
of Parliament.
fréquence? Je m'excuse, je veux pas être...
How often? I don't want to be impolite, sorry, but the time is passing quickly. So how frequently does this come before Parliament?
Well, first of all, the parties are represented, if you recall, within these entities. And for reference, I do believe there's Conservatives as well as Bloc members who are part of the review. So it is a representative entity that does report ultimately to Parliament on an annualized basis.
Merci, Monsieur Fortin. Nous allons revenir à
Thank you,
vous.
Mr. Fortin. We'll come back to you probably a little later on. And now, over to Member Strauss. 5 minutes.
Honored to get to ask you these questions. Do you believe that AI deepfakes, misinformation, disinformation, and the like are threats to the integrity of the Canadian telecommunications system?
I think there are threats on a number of in a number of ways.
They are threats to our telecommunication system. So my concerns with this bill are largely surrounding 15.2. If there are reasonable grounds to believe that it is necessary to do so to secure the Canadian telecommunication system against any threat, and then to paraphrase a little bit, the Minister of Industry, that being Melanie Joly, may consult with the Minister of Public Safety, that being you, to, quote, prohibit a telecommunication service provider providing any service to any specified person. Am I any specified person? Or potentially?
I think you're looking at the clause in isolation, Mr. Strauss, and let me just say, like, in order to execute one of these, revocations, for lack of a better term, there is a process in place. So it is not
does not include a warrant. Is that correct?
Arbitrary. If I could just maybe finish, it is not an arbitrary process. There is. We need to have evidence that that individual poses a threat to the critical infrastructure, cyber infrastructure of the country, and without that, their account could not be revoked.
Minister, so why does it say telecommunication system instead of critical infrastructure in the bill? Like, it's your bill.
Good point.
In this particular case, there is some technical issues, Mr. Chair. At some point, maybe we can look at it.
I'll just and we'll stop the clock for a second. I think it was MP Lloyd who appropriately raised a question of microphones and recordings. The system, according to my understanding, works in the following manner. If we want to be heard, when we start speaking, we need to turn the microphone on a second or two before we do so, so the system connects to your microphone. So it's a matter of 1, perhaps 2 seconds before you speak. If you absolutely want to be heard, and which is the normal case, I suppose, you need to connect your microphone before a second or two before you start speaking. Having said that, MP Strauss, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I have a concern about critical infrastructure, and I think impingements on civil liberties to protect critical infrastructure could be justified, but that's not what the bill says. So could you allay my concern by, instead of saying the telecommunication system, changing it to say critical infrastructure pertaining to the telecommunication system?
Look, if that's an amendment that you would wish to make, I will be more than willing to look at it. Mr. Strauss, I can't give you that answer, off the top without giving some reflection and getting some advice on it, but we'll be more than glad to look at it.
I mean, I've been raising this in the House for more than a month, so I would prefer that you had reflected on it already.
If I may, the debate oftentimes brings a number of perspectives there that may not materialize into amendments. So I do think, from a process perspective, if there's something you want to put forward as part of the amending process that we will have in this committee, I will more than glad to look at it.
I will do. Thank you. And then also, subsection 3 says that the order that is made to any person to deny them any service, which is obviously overbroad, may include the prohibition of the disclosure of its existence. So if I did something that you and Melanie Joly thought was misinformation, and you decide to revoke my internet privileges, you can order me not to disclose that to anyone. Is that correct?
To be clear, this is not about misinformation, Mr. Strauss.
You said that's a threat to telecommunications.
Absolutely not about misinformation. This is about critical threats to our infrastructure, including telecommunications. So let's not, I think we have to be very careful. There's a delineation here. There's misinformation that happens every single day around on a range of different platforms, and they are not subject to this legislation. What is subject to the legislation is if an individual causes a threat to our telecommunication infrastructure or other critical infrastructure.
But Minister, it doesn't say that. Like, it doesn't say critical infrastructure. You're telling me the bill's not about what it says. So in any case, if I threaten it, in whatever, however you interpret 15.1, if I threaten it, then you can order me not to say that I've been kicked off the internet. Is that correct?
It is not about kicking people off the internet, Mr. Strauss. It's about the protection of our infrastructure, of our telecommunications
by kicking people off
systems.
The internet.
Not based on frivolous, allegations, right? Because we are living in a world of misinformation. Sadly, it is a sad reality, I think, for all of us here and all of us as politicians. face that on every single day.
Who decides if the allegations are frivolous? Who decides that? If it's not a judge?
Sorry, I was a bit patient, but as you will have known, MP Strauss and Minister, when those comments and questions overlap, it becomes impossible for a significant portion of those listening to us understand what's going on because the interpreters cannot do their job. So I'd like to invite both of you to speak in a manner which makes it possible for everyone to follow the conversation.
If the interpreters have a problem, they will flag the clerk.
Back to you, MP Strauss, for 30 seconds.
They haven't said they have a problem.
If these secret orders are not subject to judicial review, then it is you and Melanie Joly who will decide if there are reasonable grounds and if the threat is significant. So when you say it's not arbitrary, it is arbitrarily left to the ministers by my reading of the bill. Is that not correct?
We rely on information and advice from experts. Some of them are here today.
I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. Why would you not?
I'm sorry. That will be the end of the segment. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, so I would hate to suspend. So that is the end of the segment. We have 5 minutes now for MP Assassi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here with us again today. I have to say that I find members opposite just rambling off all the time on this legislation. I find it to be a very sophisticated piece of legislation. So what Mr. Strauss just said, he says that if someone says something that you disagree with, then you could cut off their access to the internet. In very, very clear language, tell me why there is no chance that would ever happen.
Categorically say that will not happen, Mr. Assassi. The situation here is about ensuring our infrastructure, our critical cyber infrastructure, is protected. In an exceptional circumstance where an individual's account may be revoked, it is with the clear understanding that individual poses a continued threat, so that person continuing the service will pose a threat to our critical infrastructure. This is not an ad hoc exercise. This comes from advice that we will receive from experts, and I revoked. It is with the clear understanding that individual poses a continued threat, so that person continuing the service will pose a threat to our critical infrastructure. This is not an ad hoc exercise. This comes from advice that we will receive from experts, and I am going to ask Mr. Arbour, with your permission, to maybe elaborate on the work and the analysis that they do before the advice goes to the Minister of Industry, who will then bring it to my attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The phrase telecommunications system stems from the existing vocabulary in the Telecommunications Act that goes back many decades, and so it is speaking to the telecommunications facilities and services rather than the commentary of individuals' expressive commentary. So the types of threats that we may be concerned about would be, for instance, an incident in 2016 when Canadian traffic bound for Korea was redirected to China for 6 months and opened up to surveillance in that regard. It can involve malware or ransomware that is threatening to bring down our telecommunications networks on which Canadians rely. The order power in question refers to a reasonable necessity corresponding to the gravity of the threat to require in that instance. So if other remediation mechanisms are not possible, as a last resort, that is the circumstances of that authority. In terms of confidentiality, that exists where divulging the vulnerability in question would invite greater cyber attacks to the telecommunications services in question, and is subject to review in terms of notification to NCR and NSECOP and an annual report to Parliament that must describe the orders in question, including their necessity and reasonableness. Thank you.
Thank you. And last week when you were here, your testimony was very, very helpful. Minister, so just one more time, just to clarify this issue. So what are the safeguards in this bill And why are the assertions being made by Mr. Strauss not to be taken seriously? Because not only does this legislation have many safeguards, in addition to that, it seems that he doesn't even understand the most basic concepts of administrative law. So would you kindly clarify that for Canadians?
Let me broaden the issue. Look, I think Canadians are rightfully concerned about their privacy rights, and they should be, right? Every Canadian should protect their privacy with the utmost vigor and their free speech with the same level of vigor. What we're trying to do here is in no way to impede on individuals' right to free expression, their individual ability to access internet or other telecommunication services. We are under the narrowest of circumstances, as Mr. Arbour had explained, going after individuals, and as a last resort, those who pose a threat to our telecommunication system. Oftentimes, it's dangerous to read legislation in a manner that doesn't connect to other long-standing legal covenants. I think it's important in the context of legislative review to look at the established covenants and established legal principles in which we're working. So I can appreciate, I think, some of the concerns that are expressed, but it is ill-founded and it is without merit. What is important, I think, for the purpose of this committee, and I would really implore this committee to look at where we are today with respect to the challenges around cyber security and what measures we need to take as parliamentarians to protect everyone in Canada and every critical infrastructure, telecommunications and others, in order to safeguard against threats.
Thank you, Minister and MP Assassi, for that exchange. This is the end of this part of the meeting. So our gratefulness, our gratitude to the officials who took the time to participate today. We will suspend for a few moments before we turn to the second hour on a different topic.
Okay, we're just gonna flip to something else. Gary's still gonna be here. They're just bringing in other officials. But Gary's still here for the next hour, so we're still going to keep watching this. We're just going to tune into something else in the meantime. Let's see what Proc's doing. Nothing really interesting at Proc. We'll just tune into the House, because I believe they're still debating the budget.
Montreal. This is giving people back their dignity, their dental health, and their smiles, Mr. Speaker. This is an investment in social justice. This allows people to not have to end up in the ER. This prevents complications, and it improves people's quality of life. Mr. Speaker, this budget, I repeat, does not cut any programs. In fact, it maintains and even enhances all the social programs which help Canadian families, seniors, and young people. This is proof that we can invest more while managing things responsibly. This budget also brings real help to those who support our healthcare system. That's why we have our new tax credit for personal support workers, which will recognize the essential contributions of frontline workers. These are the people who take care of our parents, of our neighbors, of our loved ones who are vulnerable. They often work in the shadows, and they're not always recognized. They do incredible work. There are people who do such great work. Frontline workers help seniors. Without them, I might not be here today. In Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, this support will directly help the CHSLD Seniors Home in Saint-Eustache. It's a seniors home, and this will also help home care organizations. These people deserve more than our recognition. They deserve real help, and this budget will give them that.
What the hell?
In our ridings, seniors have a key role to play. They are the pillars of our families, of our institutions, and of our values. We have a program called New Horizons for Seniors. You likely have that in your ridings too. The program is renewed in Budget 2025. It's a great example of our programs and how they help people. It allows financing for local projects, which will have a direct impact on the well-being of seniors. Through the program, there's been renovation and support to the Lions Club, Club Lion, which helps our community. These projects are about people. These are places where people can gather, where they can fight feeling alone, and where people can participate actively in community life. Seniors are at the heart of our vision for an inclusive and caring Canada. We recognize and support seniors. Now we also want to help young people. Budget 2025 improves the Summer Jobs Canada program. I'm very familiar with the program, and it makes a difference in our communities. We are earmarking about $600 million over 2 years for the program, which will allow for the creation of 100,000 summer jobs starting in 2026. For our young people, this is so often their first work experience. It makes them feel proud, and it's a step towards the workforce. In Rivière-des-Mille, young people work in day camps and at community centers, for small businesses, for municipalities. And this means that we can bring down costs, and families can continue to send young people to day camps, and they can focus on their jobs.
Okay, while we're waiting for committee, I have taken a look at this shameful CBC Q&A, and it's quite funny. Some of the people in their chat are like, "Oh my God, CBC lies." Let's see some other ones. That's all they have. They only have like 10 chatters. They only have a couple hundred people watching them. And why are they using journalists to talk about the budget? It's a 495-page document. I'm sure they haven't read it all. And I'm sure even if they did, they can't even fully comprehend everything that's in it. They're not experts in that. Host of the House and senior political reporter. So they're two journalists talking about a budget they haven't even fully read, nor do they fully comprehend, because they're not educated enough to understand everything. It's kind of funny, actually. What a pitiful stream.
Saint-Eustache and de Montagne, entrepreneurs are innovating every day. They create jobs, they train newcomers to the profession, they export their products and contribute to making us proud. The budget sends them a clear message that the government believes in them. This budget helps Quebec, which drives innovation and the future. Quebec benefits from this budget, Mr. Speaker. There are investments in aeronautics, aerospace, and AI to enhance our global leadership, too. Kinova is a business in Boisbriand in robotics. It helps healthcare and mobility. We also have transport businesses.
Okay, good thing committee's back, because I don't want to sit here and listen to her cry anymore.
Integrity of the Canadian immigration system and respecting other related security measures. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses for this second hour. We have the Honourable Gary Anandasangari, Minister of Public Safety, from the Canada Border Services Agency.
Aaron O'Gorman.
Aaron O'Gorman, President.
Who shouldn't have a job.
From the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, Jean-Marc Jeunet, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Protection and Family Program Sector, and Tara Lang, Director General, Integrity Policy and Programs. From the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Shannon Granger, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Portfolio Affairs and Communications. And from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Jody Boudreau, Deputy Commissioner, Federal Policing. Welcome to you all, and you now have 5 minutes, Minister, for your comments.
Why does he get another opening remark?
I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak about Bill C-12, the Strengthening Canada's Immigration and Borders Act, and I want to thank the committee for the work that you're undertaking in advancing this legislation. This crucial piece of legislation will provide our law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to keep our border safe and secure, and communities across the country safe. Notre frontière est bien protégée, mais nous devons...
Our borders are well protected, but we need to continually evolve to keep them that way and to address emerging threats.
Successes. Last year, the Canada Border Service Agency seized over 50,000 kilograms of prohibited drugs, cannabis, narcotics, and chemicals. This is in addition to seizing more than 900 firearms. As well, the CBSA removed over 18,000 inadmissible people in 2024-25, the highest in a decade, and an increase of approximately 16,000 from 16,000 the year before. To build on these successes and adopt a changing world, we need to ensure that our law enforcement agencies have the necessary legal authorities to act. Bill C-12 does that. After we introduced Bill C-2, the Strong Borders Act, in June, parliamentarians and stakeholders expressed concerns about provisions in the bill. Our government listened. With this new Bill C-12, we believe we strike the right balance between the need to protect our borders and Canadians' privacy rights. Bill C-12 draws on Bill C-2's elements that are designed to strengthen the surveillance of our borders, combat transnational organized crime, and stop those that seek to exploit our immigration system. Nous avons déposé le projet de loi C-2.
We've introduced Bill C-12 because there is urgency to get law enforcement the tools they need.
So many of the threats to our border have a link back to transnational organized crime. It is imperative that we're proactive, stay ahead of the criminals, and close any vulnerabilities that may exist. Through this bill, we would amend the Customs Act to obligate certain ports of entry and exit to provide and maintain facilities for any purpose that falls under the Canada Border Service Agency's mandate, including examination and detention of goods destined for export. The bill also amends the Oceans Act to add security-related activities to the Coast Guard, including the ability for the Coast Guard to conduct security patrols, collect and share information with security and law enforcement partners. In addition, Bill C-12 would enhance the RCMP's ability to share information on registered sex offenders with domestic and international partners. It would introduce measures to strengthen our authorities related to immigration documents and information sharing. It will strengthen Canada's asylum system by improving the application process to ensure that the system is not used as a shortcut to regular migration. Bill C-12 would also strengthen Canada's anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist fundraising regime. En fait, nous savons que la drogue illicite.
Finally, we know the devastating impacts that illicit drugs, including fentanyl, have on our communities.
Quickly controlled precursor chemicals that can be used to produce illicit drugs. They will allow law and border enforcement agencies to move quickly to prevent the illegal importation and use of precursors and will ensure strict federal oversight over any legitimate use of these chemicals. I want to reassure law enforcement that we intend to advance Bill C-2 to ensure they have the necessary resources to deal with the complex and sophisticated crimes we are seeing today. We need to be in line with our Five Eyes partners and the members, and as members of Parliament, we owe it to Canadians to work together to get this done. Our hardworking CBSA and our RCMP officers work around the clock to keep our borders and communities safe, and I want to thank them for their service. Nous leur devons toute notre reconnaissance et c'est notre devoir.
We owe them a debt of gratitude, and we owe it to them to give them authorities and the tools that will increase their effectiveness and increase their capacity.
And I'm happy to take questions.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre, ce qui nous permet de parler.
Thank you, Minister. And now over to Mr. Caputo.
Get him, Caputo.
Questions, and first I begin by thanking the officials for being here. I'll be focusing my questions, Mr. Chair, to the Minister and, where appropriate, Ms. O'Gorman. Ms. O'Gorman, do you have addresses for the 32,000 people listed on your website who are currently deportable and on warrant, as in you don't know where they are? Do you have addresses for those people?
Well, as you say, we don't know where they are, so we don't have their addresses.
So when the Minister says, and this was his testimony last time. Mr. Caputo, we have addresses for individuals who are in the removal queue, quote, and then end quote. You don't have addresses for people in the removal queue. That's correct?
Well, you made reference to a particular part of the removal queue.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have removals in progress. We know where those people are. We are in close touch with them. We are ensuring they are removed. We do have warrants out for individuals who have absconded.
Right. You don't know where they are. So, obviously people do contact my office, so I'm wondering how many armed officers, because the armed officers are the only ones who can make the arrests, is that right? When it comes to people who have a warrant for their arrest, they're the ones who literally go out and find these people, correct?
Yes.
How many armed officers do you have looking for these individuals?
So I'm going to expand it a little bit.
Okay.
We have 1,000 inland enforcement officers who deal with IRPA. So they may be in our detention facilities, they may be doing IRB hearings, or they may be doing removals. Approximately 500 people are doing removals. They may occasionally do a hearing. They may be dealing with somebody in detention. And so you're pinning me down to one number when we have quite a dynamic workforce, but I can say approximately half of those people are dealing with removals, and they're supported by administrative help who deal with the files so that they can do the going out and finding people.
So you're telling me that on a daily basis or day to day, there are 500 people in CBSA approximately 500 people who are armed and are looking for these fugitives. Is that accurate?
I'm going to say approximately because there's a lot going on in our inland enforcement, but they relate to individuals who are in Canada who perhaps should not be here, who are in Canada who might pose a risk to Canadians and are in detention, or are having their IRB hearing, and our officers will be representing the minister if we have concerns.
Okay. My information is that in the GTA there are only 55 people who are armed, approximately, and that about 10 are on the street daily looking for people who are on warrant. Would you dispute that number?
So your
this is for
precision around being armed, I am going to have to come back to you.
Could you
because
please?
we do have CBSA officers who may not be armed, but who will be helping to execute removal. So I'll come back to you with a breakdown.
Okay. How many Minister, do you know how much money has been spent, or let me just really drill down. I'll just ask the Minister first, and Ms. O'Gorman can help. How many dogs have been trained to as drug sniffer dogs in the CBSA?
I'm going off recollection. I'm going to say between 65 to 75.
Okay, Ms. O'Gorman, is that?
We'll come back with a breakdown. We have drug detector dogs, we have currency dogs, and we have food, plant, and animal dogs.
How many dogs have been trained to track fentanyl?
Again, it's a new area, Mr. Caputo, so we're at the early stages of that training, and we will be enhancing that over the coming months.
So again, when it comes to the number, I don't want whether we're early, I want a number. How many dogs have been trained to track fentanyl, please?
I don't know, Mr. Caputo.
Ms. O'Gorman, do you know?
We're doing that right now. It's quite a new area. I believe the Americans were forerunners. We are working with them, but we're also working with allies. So fentanyl, as you can appreciate, highly toxic substance, and there weren't many inert, sufficiently similar goods that we had. To train our dogs. So
Ms. O'Gorman,
again, we can come back.
I'm not trying to cut you off, but I'll be very direct. Have any dogs completed the training to track fentanyl for the CBSA?
I'm not sure if they've completed their training.
Okay, so we may actually have no dogs. The U.S. has dogs to track fentanyl, I assume. I assume they're the RCMP, I assume. I'm not sure if anybody at the RCMP can tell us whether there are dogs to track fentanyl. But what I'm hearing is we don't actually know. It sounds like there might be 0 dogs tracking fentanyl at this time, even though the problem of fentanyl trafficking has been at the feet of this government, which beckoned the response of C2 and C12. Do we have any dogs that know how to track fentanyl with the CBSA?
If I may answer this, Mr. Caputo, we were at the Five Eyes in the UK back in September, and there was a demonstration of dogs that are now trained with fentanyl. So they do have a number of dogs. The other five countries are in the process of doing the training. So we are.
But does Canada?
At this point, we are working towards ensuring we have dogs who can detect fentanyl.
I see my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. Madame McCann pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair.
IRCC faced unprecedented backlogs and delays. So if the powers in Bill C-12 had existed during COVID, how would that have helped manage the situation more efficiently and provide clearer direction to applicants and families at the time?
I know that I think Mr. Diab's answered a number of these questions at the Immigration Committee, but I'll just reaffirm that, post COVID and during COVID, one of the challenges that we had under IRPA is our inability to cease processing or to suspend it, and or to turn people away from processing. And it is one of the drivers, I believe, that has brought forward provisions in C-12 that does enable the Minister of Immigration through order in council to be able to terminate or to suspend certain documents, immigration documents.
Thank you, Minister. So going forward, how will these new authorities make us better prepared for future emergencies without disrupting regular immigration processes?
I believe this is very much in line with the previous conversation we had around cyber security. There are emerging threats to our systems. On the immigration front, there is a great deal of world events that are taking place that will impact our intake and our processing of immigration documents. There have been around the world many cyber incidents that have disabled or that have tarnished systems, and this is a preemptive move by our government to ensure that we have the tools necessary if and when it may need to be used. My sincere hope is that it doesn't have to be used rarely, but in the event that we need to use it, those tools are available in our toolbox.
Thank you, Minister. So BC-12 makes important updates on both the Customs Act and the Oceans Act, strengthening Canada's ability to secure its borders on land and at the sea. So under Part 1 of Bill C-12, the Customs Act would be amended to give CBSA stronger authority to access and examine goods in export facilities and warehouses that were previously harder to inspect. How will the new authorities under the Act help CBSA better prevent illegal goods and contraband from leaving Canada while keeping trade efficient for legitimate exporters? Sorry.
I think it's a great question, and this summer I've had a chance to go to many ports of entry, many port authorities, and one of the common themes that we have seen, and it's not that we don't have the legislative authority. CBSA has the legislative authority to search outbound goods. However, we don't compel ports or entry points or exit points to provide search facilities. And what the amendments to the Custom Act will do is essentially have a port have exit search capabilities, whether it's on site or a little bit far from it. The Gordie Howe Bridge, I think, is an area that I know you and I were there together a few months ago, and we saw firsthand how advanced those facilities are. Many of our ports of entry are much older and don't have that facility. So this really encourages and enables those ports to have these services available to us.
If you can pause my time for 1 second. I think, Mr. Chair, there was a problem with the microphone. The last portion didn't come to my earpiece. Did you hear the question?
I heard the question,
Oh,
but
the
we will,
answer?
for certainty, we will ask the
Thank you.
technician to look
Thank
into
you.
that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So, Minister, will CBSA have the resources and the technology it needs to apply these power efficiently at high-volume ports like Montreal and Vancouver?
Maybe I'm going to ask the President to answer that question, if that's okay.
So both the border plan and the most recent budget have allocated funding for detection technology for CBSA and additional officers. So we will allocate those officers based on risk, and given where the volumes are coming, certainly marine ports are one of those areas where we would look to enhance. The port owners and operators, I have to say, are good partners, and this doesn't reflect them not providing us space, but it's also legal certainty for them, for their board of directors, as they have to spend money to create potentially additional facilities for CBSA. They are quite happy with that certainty.
Thank you for that, Ms. O'Gorman. And of course, securing our borders isn't just about what leaves or enters through land crossing. It also extends to our waters, as mentioned. So under Part 4 of Bill C-12, the Oceans Act would be amended to give the Canadian Coast Guard a formal security mandate, including the authority to collect and share intelligence with CBSA and the RCMP and the public safety. So how will this new authority improve coordination among agencies to help Canada respond faster to smuggling, illegal fishing, and other transnational threats at sea?
I believe we already have a great deal of coordination that takes place amongst the agencies, both within Canada as well as many of our partners south of the border. The Detroit Operations Center, for example, and our customs, our CBSA, as well as our CMP have ongoing dialogue. Virtually every area within the U.S.-Canada border, we have ongoing communication that is essential to guard our border. The expansion of the role for the Coast Guard is essential, particularly in the north, and that will advise and allow us to coordinate even greater.
Thank you, Minister.
Merci, Madame la députée Akan.
Thank you, Ms. Arcan. And now over to Mr. Brunel Duceppe. Welcome. Thank you. Very nice of you to welcome me. And thank you, Minister, for being here today. And thank you to your officials. Minister, at this time, an individual crossing the border illegally, who hides for 2 weeks illegally, and then demonstrates that he's been on Canadian territory for 14 days, can request asylum. Can you explain to me what the logic is behind that clause?
Merci, Monsieur Bernal Duceppe, pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Built within the Safe Third Country Agreement between Canada and the United States, as you're aware, we came to an agreement, I believe it was early last year, with respect to irregular border crossings between Canada and the U.S. So the 14-day period was embedded as part of one of the exemptions to the Safe Third Country Agreement. We have found, or IRCC has found, that it is an area where those dates can be manipulated, and in order to ensure that those loopholes are not used in an adverse way, that is the primary reason why it's embedded within this legislation here.
Perhaps you're mistaken. That clause has been there since the signature with Mr. Biden, that 14 days. Last year, what was different? Oh, okay, because you were talking about last year, so that's different. But
Safe Third Country Agreement.
But you haven't explained the logic behind any of this. With C-12, what I've understood is that it will no longer be possible, or it will be unacceptable to have an application for refugee status to be made even if you can prove that you've been there for 2 weeks, because it's rather a schizophrenic clause. To be able to ask for asylum, you have to first break the law. that's pretty special, isn't it? In C12, we're saying that that application will no longer be accepted. But what happens to that individual who's crossed the border on a regular basis, but then hid for irregularly and then hides for 14 days? And then will they be able to have a pre-removal risk assessment under C12?
So those who are deemed to be ineligible, either who are either through the Safe Third Country Agreement or who are in Canada for a year, will both be eligible for a pre-removal risk assessment. Yes.
I'm not sure if I've understood your answer. The question is, the individual under C12, the person that I referred to earlier, is that person going to be able to have the pre-removal risk assessment? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Now, I imagine that there are situations in which people who can't be sent back to countries do you believe that now criminal smugglers are using they're not only exploiting immigrants by charging astronomical sums to have them cross the border, but now they can add the fact that they hide them for 14 days. So they're almost doubling the cost that they're asking migrants to pay, both to cross the border and then to be hidden for 2 weeks. Are you aware of this practice by the people smugglers?
There's a range of criminal activity that have taken place over the years, and an exploitation of individuals, many of them who may be very, very vulnerable, and it does impact certainly, I think, on their well-being, but also it exposes Canada to a level of risk through transnational organized crime that we're trying to address here as well.
This is very important. This 14-day clause is essential for me. We are hearing from organizations that help immigrants on both sides of the borders. They're telling us that that 2-week clause is making things worse and worse because people are not coming to regular entry points, but they're still using this loophole that we have with the Safe Third Country Agreement. And C12 is not going to resolve this necessarily because they will still be able to access the pre-removal risk assessment. So there's still motivation. So criminal smugglers can sell the idea of smuggling to these potential migrants. So we see a lot of young women crossing the border who are at the mercy of these people for 14 days because they have to be hidden for 14 days. Now we're talking about prostitution rings. We're talking about forced sex work. So I don't see in C12 anything to resolve this situation. Right now, there are organizations in the field that are sounding the alarm about the exploitation of people under this 14-day clause. So isn't there some clear way for the Canadian government either to discuss this with the U.S. authorities to review the Safe Third Country Agreement and remove the 14-day clause so as to no longer allow criminal smugglers to use that variable to further exploit people? And we're talking not only from a humanitarian point of view, but also from a security point of view. These people are very often in a state of despair. They're desperate. Thank you very much, Mr. Brunet-Duceppe. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait for the answer, but you've already exceeded your allotted time, which now brings us to Ms. Lloyd for 5 minutes. Mr. Lloyd.
Sure, Minister, it's interesting that C12 is legislation that has evolved from the previous legislation you introduced, C2, the Strong Borders Act. I just find it an interesting kind of unintended admission that if you have a bill coming forward called the Strong Borders Act, it's really saying that our borders are not strong at all. And I say, Minister, since our last meeting when I raised the issue of the Mexican visas being lifted in 2016, have you had a chance to review the information that I raised to you? And do you have any other thoughts on the impact that your government's decision to lift those visas in 2016 have had on weakening our border and our immigration system?
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd, for the question. Look, either whether it's Bill C-12 or C-2, it's very much premised on the fact that we need to do more to strengthen our border, to strengthen law enforcement's ability to both enforce as well as give them additional tools to make sure that our borders are stronger. Our borders are very strong as a starting point. It's not perfect, but of course it is the longest undefended border in the world, and one where over
Minister,
time we've had very good cooperation.
Thank you, Minister. Given the information that I gave you last week about the statistics we received about deportations from Mexican nationals since 2016, are you now willing to recognize the evidence that your government is largely responsible for the rapid increase in deportations from Canada, resulting in people that shouldn't have been here?
First of all, last year we closed the ability of Mexican nationals to come here without a visa, which I think has been an important step. Additional measures we've taken at the border, including the bill that's in front of you, I believe addresses many of the concerns that were identified.
Thank you, Minister. I just want to provide some more details because we had some redacted documents last week and I received some more information. In 2016, the first year that your government lifted the visa requirement, there were about 128 people from Mexico detained at the border. The visas worked. It prevented people from coming here who, had questionable backgrounds. Do you have any idea what that number was in 2017 after your government had lifted the visas? It went from 128 people in 2016 to 2,471 people in 2017. That is a massive, massive change. In fact, if you look cumulatively from 2016 to 2024, 11,000 out of 16,000 people who were detained at the border were Mexican nationals. That's 68% of all the people that were detained at the border since your government lifted the visa requirement. This is huge work for the CBSA to do. These people were also released on a 48-hour alternative to detention. Minister, do you not recognize that there was a cause and effect? You said you saw no correlation in the last meeting, that you lifted this visa requirement and your government opened the floodgates for this to come to Canada.
Mr. Lloyd, I don't like to target a particular community or a particular nation. I can speak to you in a broader sense. What's important, I think, is we take measured steps to, first of all, put in restrictions. In the case of Mexico, we have done that as of last year. It's also about ensuring that within Canada there are enforcement as well as tools for law enforcement to be able to address those who are coming across our border who are ineligible to be here.
Minister, you say that you don't want to target communities, and by your own admission, your government reimposed the visas on Mexico in 2024. In fact, in 2023, there were over 3,000 people that were deported from Canada to Mexico. That was 40% of all the deportations that Canada did in 2023 from that one country. So you're coming here talking and accusing members of targeting specific countries? Well, Minister, the statistics show that it's your government.
Let me be very clear, Mr. Lloyd. I'm not suggesting that you're targeting. I'm suggesting that I don't want to get into that frame of discussion. But what I can tell you is that Mexico and the United States are our closest trading partners with longstanding trade links, including the USMCA. So there are economic reasons where certain decisions
in my last 15 seconds, Minister, and yet prior to your government lifting the visa requirements, this wasn't an issue. We had great bilateral trading relationships with our Mexican allies, with our American allies, and yet your government's decision resulted in this absolute chaos at the border, and that's why this legislation is before us today. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le député Lloyd, pour ce segment.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd, for this segment of our meeting. Ms. Dandurand, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I like the line of questioning that my Bloc colleague began. Thank you, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. Minister, I'd like to continue along that line because there's a lot of concern regarding the irregular entries and what's going to happen. Could you define what is currently an irregular entry and what will become an irregular entry in the amendments in C12. My line of questioning is really to know, how is the situation going to be improved? Thank you for the question.
I do want to acknowledge the work that you're doing at your border. I know you have a number of border crossings in your communities and the area that you represent. Look, the C12, it's, by itself doesn't necessarily change the process by which individuals, either regularly through ports of entry or through irregular ports of entry, come into Canada. What this does is there does appear to be a loophole, as Alexis Brunel-Duceppe had indicated, on the 14 days. It merely clams down and makes that exemption within the Safe Third Country Agreement, nullifies that and ensures that those who are coming in through the regular ports of entry have to file a claim right away. And notwithstanding, their ineligibility, they will get a pre-removal risk assessment, which is a very different process than a referral to the Immigration Refugee Board. Most experts, most refugee advocates would suggest that the IRB is well placed for refugee determination, whereas we're of the belief that in line with our obligations to the Refugee Convention of 1951, the hearing will be as part of the pre-removal risk assessment, which is a very different type of a process. So there is some tightening of regulation that will enable us to streamline these processes.
Merci. Et puis
Thank you. In recent years, we've seen a lot of irregular entries into Canada, specifically into Quebec. These people stay for the study. I think the whole system is choked full, and there are people who come into Canada under false pretenses and claim to be asylum claimants. Is C12 going to make it possible to clean up this bottleneck and to make more room for people who are asylum seekers? Is this the objective?
President O'Gorman to comment, and then let me just complete that. Thank you.
I'd like to say something, and I'd also like to invite my colleague from the RCC to deal with the 14-day issue.
Between the ports, which, comme c'était dit, c'est dangereux.
As has been said, that's dangerous, and we end up having victims of trafficking. So in terms of the efficiencies, thank you for the question. Yes, the bill in question has measures to make the system more efficient. When we're talking about making application regardless of the method of entry, the approach will be consistent, which is easier for claimants. We'll be asking information once from them at the right time. We'll be sure that we and the CBSA receive the information before referring the file forward. So the idea is to make the whole process more efficient. And in terms of the new notion of inadmissibility, this is an effort. We recognize that there are a lot of files in the system. We want to protect the system to ensure that claims which are not admissible will be still protected, to make sure that there's some way of not sending people into dangerous situations through the risk assessment process. You have 5 seconds left. I think we can move on to the next. Thank you. I'll give my 5 seconds to my colleagues since we're asking the same questions. Very well, then. Nice agreement across the room. So, which leads us to 2.5 minutes for Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. 2 minutes and 35 seconds. The bill talks about respecting international obligations for abuse. I'm referring to what the law says, the bill says. Before, there was an explicit notion of transmission of information and political prosecution. Isn't this too broad now? Why are we changing the way it's phrased? Are we suddenly prepared to provide information that is sensitive to people who could perhaps use that information in a way that is unsafe?
International legal commitments could essentially impact their safety and security. The name of the bill, the convention actually slips my mind, but it is a principle that we work on. So any information that is shared, and we routinely share information, especially with the Five Eyes countries, on a range of issues, including biometrics. We do that for regular immigration processing, whether it's be TRVs or other, security checks, and that happens on an ongoing basis.
Monsieur le Ministre,
Minister? It's a fairly straightforward question. Why is the phrasing being changed? Why don't we use what was there previously, in other words, an explicit prohibition against sending documentation? It's scaring a lot of people. And if I'm asking the question, it's because various groups have raised it to us. They've made us aware of this issue, and I don't understand why the phrasing is being changed. People are concerned, and they're probably not concerned for no reason.
Amendment that you want to make, then we will be more than willing to look at the proposed changes. It is really led by Minister of Immigration, so I will bring it to her. But
est-ce que Monsieur Gionet voulait, Madame?
I mean, the Minister of Blinking?
Thank you for the question. So there are a number of different changes that are happening in the bill in regards to information sharing. So the first is in IRPA. So it's reg-making authority to allow IRCC to disclose information for cooperation with federal partners in prescribed scenarios. This would require future regulations and information sharing agreements to be put in place before that would happen. This authority mirrors what also exists in IRPA for making regulations for cooperation with the provinces and territories, and also parallels the same authorities in the Citizenship Act. The second part would be amendments to the Department of Citizenship and Immigration Act. So the changes here are breaking down barriers.
Je vais devoir vous demander de conclure. Merci pour cette intervention. Madame la députée Kirkland, pour 5 minutes.
This will be the last round.
Thank you very much. I will use my minutes. I might use all of them. If not, I may defer some to Mr. Al, or give some to Mr. Al. Ms. Minister, I respect some of the things you said in your opening statement. You mentioned some things like keeping safe and secure, keeping borders across our country safe. You used the word proactive, and you used the word urgency to get the law enforcement the tools they need. And you also applauded the hardworking CBSA and RCMP officers, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. These are some of your words, and I couldn't agree more. We've had discussions in previous committee meetings with Mark Weber, who is the union president for CBSA agents, and he indicated to us that there would be some difficulty in getting 1,000 new border agents. And I don't really want to bring up, that, and I know it's going to take time to get 1,000 new border agents. My concern is with what he said. It brought some discovery to committee in terms of attrition for CBSA agents, and we trained 600 and 600 leave through attrition, and he referenced some toxicity in terms of the workplace for them, inland officers as well as border officers. And I'm wondering if you can comment or if you're aware of some of that.
Look, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate where this question is coming from. And first of all, I've been to maybe 15 ports of entry, and I have met with a number of both leaders as well as those who are working on the front lines, and I make it a point to talk to people. Look, I can't assess the workplace just based on those visits.
Okay.
I do leave it to and I have regular meetings with the union. So if there's issues, I'll be more than willing to engage them. I do have full confidence in our president and the work that she's been doing on that.
Okay, that's fair, because I may refer some questions to Ms. O'Gorman as well. And it's my understanding, and Minister, you and I, we were saying earlier, we live near the same area. You're Scarborough and I'm Oshawa, and it's my understanding, I've learned recently from a constituent of mine, that there are currently 450 grievances in just the GTA. That officers have brought forward. And Ms. Gorman, you're aware of these, I'm sure?
Yes. So I'll tackle a couple of issues.
Okay.
It's a large workforce that in many instances operates in difficult and stressful circumstances. C65, we have a professional standards, we have a large labor relations group, and there are many doors that people can go to if they have concerns, and I'm regularly briefed on that. I need to make sure people know where to go and that we can take decisions as quickly as possible. We work actually quite closely with the union to try to bring the number of grievances down. Some will be policy grievances, and there might be many policy grievances.
I do want to just get to the next point, because I am getting somewhere, and I want to get there quickly if I can. Are you noticing a toxic culture? Has it come up at all that there's a toxic culture specifically for women officers? Have you heard that at all?
Had some cases that were difficult cases that resulted in discipline. But are there more cases relating to women in the workplace than
discrimination, specifically discrimination against women in the workplace? And the reason I'm bringing this up is we want to have 1,000 new border officers, right? How are we going to get there if the attrition is so high because it's such a toxic culture?
Yeah.
And I do want to bring this up specifically because I'm aware of several women who have felt that they're afraid to actually bring a grievance forward for fear of reprisal from CBSA. They're afraid to bring them forward. So could you please comment on that?
If you will permit me, let me answer that. And first of all, I want to thank the President, and I know the leadership that she offers to CBSA. Any allegation of this sort is something that both of us, but I particularly would want to hear more about. I would invite you to, I'll be, in Constituency Week, I'll be more than willing to come to Oshawa to meet with some individuals on a without prejudice
That sounds
basis.
like a great plan. I would love to do that because we do need to study it. And my time's up, so I just want to say that that's very important. Specifically, if we are going to increase our security at our borders, if we're not taking care of the attrition and the toxic culture for our officers that we respect so much, then we're not going to be able to do that. So I think it needs to be a top priority.
I make my commitment to you on this, and I know the President.
We need to be proactive and urgent about it. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Great conversation. We now need to turn to MPSSE for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, if I could follow up with Ms. Gorman, I note that my colleague opposite has taken a sudden interest in canines that are fentanyl-sniffing dogs. So just wanted to clarify a few things on that.
Why is that
we
funny?
heard from the minister that at the Five Eyes gathering last month in the UK, there was a lot of discussion on these dogs. Would it be fair to say that this is a very new and emerging tool that various countries are considering?
It is. The safety of our officers and trainers is paramount, and the nature of fentanyl has meant that the ability to get adequate, inert, but sufficiently close materials to train the dogs has been difficult. We're working with the U.S., we're working with others. We have people actively doing that right now, and I believe training is underway. So.
Very new and emerging tool that's being used by the U.S., Canada, and our other Five Eye partners, correct?
To the extent to which we can deploy dogs to fentanyl. And I would also say our detector dogs, excellent tools, but one of many.
Absolutely. Now, the reason I ask is I know this is very cutting edge. And I must say that I find it quite disheartening that the Conservative Party is always trying to undermine the credibility of the RCMP and the CBSA officers. But it would be fair to say that the RCMP and the CBSA are just as much pioneering in their efforts as other authorities around the world are on training these dogs, which are fentanyl sniffing dogs. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, we speak to the Five Eyes and other countries regularly. They learn from us. We learn from them. Our officers will be very up to speed on what others are doing, and we often have countries come to visit our facilities in Rigaud where we do our training.
And also, right now, we're collaborating very, very closely, not only with all the Five Eyes, but with the U.S. in particular, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Would the RCMP Commissioner have anything to say about that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can confirm that we are also underway with training. I can't tell you if any have finished. I've been to the training center in Innisfil, Alberta in May. I saw how they were training. They were, explained to me how they were going to train with fentanyl. I can't tell you if any of them have completed it, but we do work very closely with CBSA. That is one of the many profiles that we train our dogs on and one of the many different types of drugs. Yeah.
And I presume it's a very complicated process because it depends on the age of the dog. The training is rather lengthy. You want to make sure that the dog is physically and mentally fit, and that a trainer is assigned to each one of them. Correct?
It is a lengthy training. Most of our dogs have multiple profiles, which means they might do tracking and they might do a bomb dog, or they might be a drug dog. So they have multiple profiles. I can't recall the exact time, but it's approximately 4 to 6 months of training. But the complication with fentanyl, as President O'Gorman said, is the toxicity of it compared to cannabis or some other drugs. It's a toxicity for trainers and for the dogs as well.
A very brief question for the minister. There was some discussion about 2016 and what the government was doing then. I do recall vividly that at the time the biggest concern was that the previous government in 2014 and 2015 had dismissed a number of CBSA officers. Is that correct, Minister?
Look, I think it's important to bring it back to C12 and why we're here. And without relitigating the past, I think it's important that we move forward. I sincerely hope that we'll have support of all the parties here.
Let me ask you a question in a very different manner. If someone were to come around and dismiss 1,000 CBSA officers and RCMP officers, what would be the consequences on that for the safety and security of Canadians?
Certainly will have impact. I can tell you adding 1,000 CBSA and 1,000 RCMP officers, again, will have material impact, a positive impact on the ability of law enforcement to do their work at the border. And I know that's what we're investing in now, and that's what I think is critical. Whether it's the budget or whether it's C12 or the additional border investments we made in December, it all adds to strengthening the border that we have.
Thank you. That is unfortunately all the time we have. Let me turn to MPR for 5 minutes.
Raj, once again, thank you for coming. And time is very limited, so I go straight into the question. Now, we could have the best legislation on paper, and also we might have the facilities to intercept illegal drugs on the border. But if there's no deterrence, those measures would be useless. So my question is, given the harmful effects of fentanyl, why were harsher penalties not included in the bill, particularly for possession, production, and trafficking offenses?
Look, Mr. Awa, I share, and I think everyone at this table shares the frustration that you have and the concern you have around fentanyl use. I've mentioned this before. I've personally been impacted by someone who died as a result of an overdose. I've seen many people over my lifetime and the work I've done who are impacted by it. So I think we all share the same objective. The C12 are border measures, right? Important border measures that are meant to give additional tools to law enforcement. Correspondingly, I think the work that Minister Fraser has done with respect to C9 does speak to what you're talking about, the need to strengthen sentencing, including consecutive sentencing, ensuring that bail is not available, and so on. So I do think it's a comprehensive approach. We're in different committees with those discussions, but it is very much a sequenced and constructive approach that we have towards addressing the issues around fentanyl.
Yeah, but the fact is, we're seeing people dying of using fentanyl, and we are seeing those fentanyl coming into our country in large amount. So why are we not doing something faster and being more effective?
You would know that I'm trying to be as apolitical as I can at this committee. What I will suggest is, if you want to help on this issue, help us pass C2. Help us bring forward issues around postal. Because if you talk to communities, if you talk to Indigenous communities in up north or any remote areas, they will say that the number one way fentanyl comes into their communities is through the post office. And that's why we had those provisions in place. That's why we have issues around
But this is exactly
money
what
laundering.
I'm hearing from our community, saying that, why do we have to wait for more people to die before actions will be taken? Now, going to the point that you just raised, I want to ask another question. Given that over 90% of fentanyl actually come to Canada through BC, right? So we know that. And in that case, why are resources not being distributed accordingly so that, we can address the problem in BC more effectively? So in your recent budget, I do not see any increase in resources to be devoted to BC to address that problem. So we know that there's 90% of those illegal drugs come to Canada through BC. So why not?
BC is certainly an area we have incredible amount of resources. I can ask either RCMP or CBS to speak about it, but I can give you the broader example. The 1,000 new CBS and RCMP officers will be deployed to ports of entry in areas where there is high need. BC certainly we see BC is not only high volume of traffic that comes in, it's also probably one of the fastest growing areas of port use. For example, Prince Rupert is expected to triple in its capacity over the next decade. So our investments that we're making right now that are in this budget will be going, and I can tell you with certainty, it will be going to BC. It will be going to areas around the.
But again, you're talking about the future. Right.
So we're talking about now. We're talking about today. We're talking about the budget that's in front of us today that will ensure that resources are going to British Columbia, that resources are going to the borders through the investment of 1,000 RCMP and 1,000 CBSA officers.
But again, this is not happening today. But well, that brings me to the third question, right? Again, you promised that there will be testing labs in Vancouver, in Toronto. So may I have an update? Are those facilities already in operation?
Well,
the labs,
10 seconds and then that's over.
The labs are available. If you would like a breakdown of where the labs are, I would be more than willing to share that with you. I would also invite you to go there. I would be more than willing to provide that access through our agencies.
Merci beaucoup, député A, pour.
Thank you very much for this exchange. And now we can move to Mr. Ramsey, 5 minutes.
Are they still doing a final round?
I'd like Ms. Lang to complete the answer to Mr. Bruno Decep's question that you weren't able to fully answer before.
Second changes have to do with the Department of Citizenship and Immigration Act. And so this is helping us improve integrity within our own system so that we can share information between ourselves as in lines of business. So as it stands right now, whenever you apply for a temporary resident visa, you have to apply once, then as a PR, you apply then. We as a department currently cannot as an officer, look at those applications. We have to ask the requester again for the material. So this will help break down fraud, and also it will be a client service piece if you can only tell us once. The part about onward sharing to foreign governments and other entities is strictly outside of the scope of these legislations. So I would want to say very specifically, it contains a prohibition against onward sharing by provincial or territorial government partners to foreign entities, except with the written consent of IRCC, and where this would happen in a way that complies with Canada's international obligations in respect of mistreatment as defined in the Avoiding Complicity and Mistreatment by Foreign Entities Act. So there is no onward sharing. This is strictly to be proactive in sharing information with provinces and territories as well as other federal agencies with information sharing agreements and or regulations.
I'd like to go back to C8 if it's possible. So, Minister,
Point of order.
I think this has been discussed already.
But there were 3 points of order in the first hour regarding us discussing bills that weren't on the hour. So I just want to make note that I decided to make a point of order for that on our side. Thank you.
My answer is the same as I gave earlier. So, Madame, Monsieur Ramsey, vous êtes
This is why I allow myself to go back to this because of the precedent ruling. So, Minister, on C8, and I lost my.
Okay, so give your time to somebody else.
What was it? Sorry. I'm very sorry. On C8, there are some critical structures, such as hospital and university, that are not in the law for good reasons because they are not under our jurisdictions. I just would like for the minister to elaborate on what step he's been taking to inform our provincial partners so that they are up to speed with the protection of these also critical structures. Thank you.
Look, our cybersecurity center, they have ongoing dialogue with the PTs, and certainly when we met 2 weeks ago in Kananaskis, it's an area that, although it wasn't formally on the agenda, but we did have a number of conversations around the impact of cyber attacks within local infrastructure. I do think it's an area we need to expand because the disclosure will benefit. If something happens in a provincial institution, it could happen federally and vice versa. So I think operationally, the information will flow from us, but we will need to get to a point where information also flows back because there's a lot of suppression around this type of an attack because people are either embarrassed or they don't want the Canadians to lose confidence in their actual system itself. So there is a fair bit of apprehension in reporting. So I think we have to normalize the reporting as required for the betterment of everyone because we are interdependent in many ways.
Now, I would like to also, still on C8, Minister has been meeting with the Five Eyes partners. I'd like to know if you think C8 matches what is seen in other jurisdictions, other countries.
Look, very much so. And C8 is an area that, like everybody is concerned about cyber attacks, and many countries have been impacted by them. I know the G7 meeting is coming up of public ministers of interior, and I believe this is on the agenda there. So it is something that's critically important to the world, and we do share routinely best practices, and the G7 will be an opportunity for us to have that conversation. I do want to just make a final pitch because
very quickly
on the Five Eyes, one of the things that I want to underscore is that Canada is the only country that does not have a lawful access regime. And it was pointed out to us, and we pointed it out to many of our colleagues. And I do sincerely hope that we can get to a point where the elements of C2 that were left behind are incorporated into legislation at some point. So
that is appreciated. Thank you. I'll have to stop. Now, pour terminer le troisième tour, Monsieur...
And to bring our third tour to a close, Mr. Bruno-Duceppe, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Not a lot of time, so I'll try to be clear and brief. How long has Canada been collating people who have been leaving the territory?
Wait, what?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Depuis quand?
So since when, to your knowledge, has Canada been collating, or does Canada collate records of people who leave Canadian territory? You keep track of people who come in, but what about people who leave?
Je pensais que vous le sauriez comme ministre de la Sécurité.
I assumed you would know this as Minister of Public Safety. I don't have the dates, as you know. For the land crossing, we have an exchange with the U.S. And when has this dated back to? I'd have to come back to you with the dates. Since 2019? Well, people leaving the U.S. comes into Canada. Well, it's been working more or less since 2020. For airlines, what about that? I don't have the date. Minister? Well, it's important to collate people coming in, people leaving, isn't it? I would guarantee to you that a public safety minister ought to know whether we're keeping track of people leaving our territory. It's a rather important piece of data, is it not? From what I understand, and to my knowledge, I'm not Minister of Public Safety, however, since 2020 alone, we've been collating land exits with the U.S., but nothing with ports and nothing with airlines. In terms of airlines, they have the data, but they are not obliged to send this information to the government. Don't you think that you could have used C12 to improve this state of affairs? It's not acceptable that a country like Canada can't collate the people leaving its territory when more and more people are coming and going out of the country. Don't you think that this is important to help keep our borders secure?
Your point, and what I can assure you is that we will, this is not the only legislation that we plan to bring forward, so in future iterations we will assess the need to do this.
Bien, merci. C'est tout le temps dont nous disposons.
Thank you very much. We are out of time. This ends the third round. Some information for our agenda. On the 18th of November, we will be having witnesses for C12. On the 20th, also for C12. On the 21st of November at noon is the deadline for any amendments to be shared regarding C12. The clerk has already sent us an email about that. And on November the 25th, C12 again, witnesses for 1 hour, clause by clause, beginning at noon. This being said, thank you all to all witnesses, thank you to the ministers, and have a good rest of day.
Okay, that's it for that committee. I've put the link for question period in chat a few times, but I'll put it in there again. It's going to be a pretty spicy question period today. Carney's going to be in there again, and we've got Pierre in there, so there'll be a little bit of back and forth there. There's the link. We've got about 49 minutes for a break, and then we'll tune into question period. Afterwards, we've got OGO. I haven't made the link for that yet, but I'll make it here shortly, and that'll be it for today. We'll be doing question period and then OGO. Good committee. Yeah, it was. I like the fact that Caputo and Lloyd get really concise with their questions, and you can see when Gary kind of stumbles on his answers, and then he contradicts himself. So it's typical Liberal behavior. But yeah, anyway, I will see you guys shortly. 48 minutes, question period. Thanks for tuning in and watching, guys. Appreciate you guys. And as you know, we won't be live tomorrow, and then they've got the whole rest of the week off next week. So our live streams, our live streams will be just today, and then we'll see you guys on November 17th. So see you guys shortly. Cheers. Bye, guys.